I realize the fans of this particular ghost of a game qualify for PTS at this point, so let me preface that everything henceforth is purely hypothetical. That being said, I think an actual story would be quite helpful for a sequel to be a hot seller. The idea of an interesting story for All-Stars 2 is possible, but the premise rests on just how much a certain company wants to cooperate with the nature of this genre of game. Allow me to indulge in my absurd nerdiness for the next several minutes. After finishing Persona 5 and proclaiming it my favorite game of recent memory, it got me thinking of another game that's close to my heart, PlayStation All-Stars. And one thing is for certain, that game was lacking a compelling story with interactions between the characters. To me, that is a cardinal sin of a crossover fighting game, and especially one that with this much ambition to tackle the lineup of Sony's famous and infamous franchises. At its core, besides gameplay, the main driving force behind a crossover title should be fun and interesting action and/or dialogue between franchises that people wish to see meld together. To quote Maximilian Dood talking about Tekken 7, the scenarios they put each of the individual characters in felt like they were doing the characters justice in some way. They were actually bringing the characters into situations that you wanted to see them in. Take, for instance, Jak and Daxter teaming up with Ratchet and Clank to kick some ass against a malevolent outside force planning on taking over the galaxy. However, if you placed Fat Princess or Aloy in this situation, the cognitive expectations of these characters is not the same as the planet-hopping heroes with 50 bajillion guns. Where characters are and how they act inside the situation is something that I think a game like All-Stars desperately needs to consider to succeed. With how diversified the character cast of Sony's roster potentially can be, with a robot dinosaur fighting woman, a melodramatic bucket of unbridled rage turned best dad, to a literal reincarnated skeleton with the tact of a doorknob, all in the same game, the meticulous placement of interaction must be fine-tuned for it to make the most enjoyment and sense possible. All-Stars characters have the potential to draw in many different types of players across the gaming spectrum. Unlike with Nintendo, however, Sony does not harken back to several of its most well-known titles, creating new games from their respective series. Thus, the player base of PlayStation users are often split by generations. There is no Super Radic World 8 to continue the public interest in Killzone franchise, and with Guerrilla Games focusing on Horizon Zero Dawn, I doubt that Killzone will ever continue in the future. However, this does in turn allow a sequel to All-Stars to sidestep another problem fighting games have. That a story mode does not mean it will sell. A good story mode, that is. Often, graphics do play an important role in bringing people into fighting games that are outside the fighting game community. However, due to the combination of a crossover title with properties that ended some time ago, people who attach themselves to a certain storyline or character will be more likely to oversee an average graphical shortcoming. Though, it has to be at least 2 grades above the uncanny valley for this to work. Here's looking at you, Infinite. Obviously, some characters will resonate more with certain people. If this is a heavy concern for the game, then the remedy to this, while extending the budget for maximum replayability outside of multiplayer, have the story branch off into different actions at the same time. For example, you could have, say, Morgana planning with the Cooper Gang to fetch a MacGuffin, while the more brawly types, such as Kratos and Noriko, take to the front lines and fight off the bigger bads like the Beast from Infamous 2, or perhaps a third-party actor like Zeus who would likely fight for himself. Afterwards, the 2 protagonist parties meet together to accomplish the main goal, sharing some cutscenes but keeping some locked content behind playing through a certain character's perspective. The mainline story and gameplay, I imagine, would take around 5 hours at most, so having 1 or 2 cutscenes for a certain character would not be outside the realm of consideration. Or should not be, anyways. No story mode, or at bare minimum a healthy arcade mode, is considerably worse than what it would be like if Smash had no story. A new Smash. All-Stars does not have the reputation nor the diverse-reaching appeal of Super Smash Bros. Nintendo can get away with it because Smash has already built up a large, dedicated, and casual fanbase of all ages and types of players. All-Stars does not have this solid base to stand on and needs to establish this fan base. For a supposed long-running series, this hypothetical sequel needs to hit it out of the park in almost all aspects, but the potential payoff can be well worth the effort. Now, I'll get to what I think could be a decent spitball story. In one of the supposed leaks, it mentions that Morgana could be a playable character in the sequel, so I'm using that assumption of Atlus's involvement as my starting off point. What I proposed is that as a loose tie to the first game, as I think distancing themselves from the first but appeasing hardcore fans is the best idea. Polygon Man realizes that he cannot take down the characters themselves after being defeated once already, so instead he decides to erase the worlds that they came from, effectively removing them from existence. But this is beyond his own power, so he grimly searches the different universes through viewing portals of each character's world for power able to achieve what he wants. This could be a great opportunity to have brief cutscenes of characters to establish what some of the lesser-known protagonists are able to do and how they act, for instance, Sir Daniel and Parappa. After searching, he comes across the Persona 5 universe, and comes to the understanding of the metaverse. He comes to the conclusion that if he is the only one cognitive of their existences after the hero's worlds are wiped out, then the characters cease to exist, ensuring his victory. To achieve this goal, Polygon Man meets with Igor, and after some threatening and ideological talking, Igor agrees to allow Polygon Man access to the metaverse, because it would be the ultimate game. But Igor agrees on one condition, that the greatest warriors with the strongest wills would also be allowed to enter this multiversal metaverse, however they will have no knowledge of how to access it. Polygon Man reluctantly accepts this proposal, as though he knows that he has lost the first time, the element of confusion of the characters thrown into the cognitive world will be enough to prepare a plan. And so Polygon Man's multiversal metaverse palace is formed. This is where Morgana comes in. He finds himself changing into his metaverse form for no apparent reason. What he sees around him still seems the same, but he is able to summon his persona. Given the unusual circumstances, he thinks this event may be related to his loss of memories and goes exploring. Eventually, he comes to Mementos and realizes that the gate into it has changed, as it now contains portals to different worlds. He goes through the first portal to find another character. Without going into too much detail, let's say here is where things start to mash together and cause chaos within the worlds. The metaverse would actually serve another purpose. It would be an in-game explanation of mashup stages like that of Haven City and Twisted Metal. The melding cognitions from Polygon Man knowing the existence of all the universes blends together, creating these conglomerate maps of two franchises when one character enters another character's universe. So, some story stuff happens, jobber fights ensues, and then eventually the characters find themselves making a big plan to face Polygon Man. Heroes and anti-heroes and all. P-Man is furious for not being able to take them down, but not really. It's just an act to give the All-Stars a false sense of confidence, as he planned that they would all band together and figure out how to find him in the depths of Mementos. Here, he reveals that through the power of his own cognition and the chaos he has spread, Polygon Man transforms into something he has always wanted, a fully functional body. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the product of the AP power he holds combined with the power of the metaverse, Polygon Man's persona. He thinks that this is what he lacked to become an icon that stood the test of time, and he's elated that his goal is near fruition. It's revealed that he has now have full moveset unique to him, and that his plan was to bide time to gather the power and wipe out all the characters out with this newfound potential. Upon beating him, he is unlocked as a secret character. This is, of course, all hinges on if Atlus is willing to play ball. I worry about their involvement not because of their reputation of their company, but because of the sheer amount of pride and care they took in making Persona 5. They originally warned that the streaming of this game or placing story spoilers in videos could lead to legal class action, as to protect the game's secret and plot. After playing it, I can see why, I just don't agree with the decision. Even though the way I envision the story doesn't reveal any secrets that would be important to Persona 5's deeper elements, it relies heavily on the involvement and application of the metaverse, and I'm not confident that Atlus would allow the usage of this particular theme to be used without heavy incentivization.
We've got to have money.
The main objective of this story should be to show off the cool abilities and personalities of each playable character. If what is written does not somehow tie back into this principle, get rid of it. The world is a tool to change and affect the character just as much as anything else. Getting certain themes down and using them to your advantage, such as Sly Cooper and Morgana are both part of a team of noble thieves and would likely see eye to eye, or that Aloy and Ellie would be able to share experiences of trapping, stealth, and hunting. This type of stuff is easy to realize for writers, but oftentimes hard to implement. Yet these are important points for characterization in crossovers, just as much as anything else you put into the story, so I think it bears repeating. At the end of the day, when a fan of multiple characters sees them team up in a game, they want to see some cool shit go down, or some funny interactions to take place. Even brief moments of lore discussion between characters would be something to relish for fans. I hope that the eventual sequel, and I have full faith that it is coming eventually, will be as cool to look at as we all envision it to be. Thanks for listening.